Our family has been on this road trip ourselves on the mainland. And so we've been on planes, trains, and automobiles and living in cramped quarters. And I have 5 kids. So anywhere we go, it's kind of a cramped quarter. And the miracle is not that we didn't kill each other, because there were some moments where we were tempted. But that's not the miracle. The miracle is just the fact that, well, I want to share with you an experience that we had. I feel like God has a word for us as a people. But I want to share with you an experience that kind of sparked this in me. One of the things we love to do when we go to California is we love to hike. And my parents live up in Lake Tahoe. It's beautiful there. My kids are really, they love the outdoors. They love really difficult hikes. So this year we decided to go on a hike that my dad calls, this is my dad's title for it, the hike from hell. Because this hike, it's a killer hike. Now, it's only 3 miles, but it's 2,000-foot elevation increase. So you start off at 6,200 feet, and you end up at 8,200 feet. It's a big increase. So it's not just distance, it's the elevation as you're going. I think when we clocked it on our phone, it's like almost 90 stories that you're climbing up and down. The goal is to get to the end of the hike, which is 3 miles, and then, because you are just whooped, you take a gondola back down, and it's kind of like your victory lap, you know? And so this is how it starts off. It's beautiful. You're in the trees, and you're just enjoying it. And then hell starts to kick in, because then you start making this vertical ascent over. This is about the part where you go like, why did we want to do this hike anyway? You know, and we're just on our way. We're not even halfway there, but you're trudging up, and it's really burning your quads and everything, other part of your body. And because of the climate in California this time of the year, when we got about 3/4 of the way up, now remember, we're local people. You know, when we go on a vacation to the mainland in the summer, we pack like 2 pairs of board shorts and some T-shirts. When we got up to about 3/4 of the way up, it looked like this. Yeah. That's what we said. I mean, literally, we popped out of the trees and we're like, uh-oh. Because we're not done yet. We're not up to the actual summit. We still have to keep going. Now, because of the snow, it was just covered. This is a ski slope. All the trails were covered up. All we saw were signs that said, closed. Don't go this way. But we had to get up to the gondola because we didn't want to climb all the way back down. So we started to blaze a trail, and about that time, this woman, she kind of jogs by us because the gondola is closed at 5 o'clock, and if you don't get there at 5 o'clock, you got to walk back down. So we see her running by, and, where are you going? We're lost. Well, I'm going to the gondola. You got to get to the gondola because it's going to close. So we just decided we'd follow her. She was running, though, in the snow, and she turned a corner, and we lost her. Yeah. So part of the party was trailing behind because we're not used to walking. I mean, we're slipping and sliding and fumbling around. The other few were ahead of us, and they accidentally went down when they should have went up. And if you go down in snow, getting back up in snow is really hard. And with a limited compressed time, we only had a few moments left to get to the gondola. They went down, and we were like, it's not down, it's still up. It was too late by then. So on the inside, I was crying. Because this is us. I'm realizing we're going to have to walk down. No more gondola. The kids are complaining. My daughter, she's so dramatic. I shouldn't have said who it was. But one of them takes out the phone and does this, Mom and Dad, thank you for helping me get through middle school. It was like her last will and testament. I called my parents and I just said, hey, look, if we don't see you, this is where we were last time we talked. And nobody wants to be this family, that goes and does the hike that you weren't supposed to do, and they had to send the rescue team. I didn't want to be that family. So, I'm torn and conflicted. And this is the moment where we realize, oh my gosh, we have to walk back down this mountain. Now, this became one of the most memorable and meaningful moments. In fact, I asked my kids, what was the most memorable moment of our vacation? And they each said, this one right here. And it wasn't just, well, it was because we survived. I mean, that made it meaningful. But it was because we persevered and we overcame adversity and we stood strong. Now, to be honest with you, we had no real choice other than dying on the mountain. But my legs were so weak at this point. And I don't know if you've ever, legs are so weak that going back down is hard. I mean, every step is kind of like, I'm shaking, and I'm like, this is so weird. I was in the back because I didn't want anybody to see it. I'm not old. This is so weird. And we had run out of water. We were getting dehydrated. We were tired. Some of the kids said some things that I can't say in church because it was the kids. It wasn't my wife. It was the kids. We were all in our mind incredibly fatigued, but when we got back down, my oldest daughter said, you know what, I didn't, with her, she was having so much trouble in the snow. Somebody had taught us, Dave Wire, who's actually at our youth camp, had said that you need at least 3 points of contact. So I told them, make spikes with your fingers, and they were actually like in the snow like this. It was so embarrassing that we didn't even take any pictures of it, or I have video, so if you want to see that, come and see me later. But my daughter said, you know what, I honestly did not know how I was going to do that. But now that we've done it, this means so much to me. I've overcome a fear. I've overcome my anxiety. I've overcome an adversity, and it means so much to me. You know what is true about that is true for you and everybody else, is that the most meaningful and worthwhile things in life are the moments where you have overcome adversity and stood strong. Isn't that true? I mean, if you're married, you know that's true. It wasn't just the day that you said, hey, I'm committing my life to you. It's the fact that now for Chris and I, 26 years down the road, we have overcome these amazing moments of adversity. There is nothing that can replace the relationship that we have because we have overcome opposition and adversity, and we have stood strong in places where it would have been very easily for us to acquiesce, to compromise, to allow the pressure and the adversity to push us in a different direction, and we didn't. And it means so much to us. The things that mean so much to us, the families and the businesses and the people, are those who have stood the test of time and have stood strong in adversity. You'll want to know this. This church is not a baby church. This church is over 60 years old. There have been moments of adversity, moments of opposition, moments where it would have been easier just to stop doing what this church does, and it didn't do it. And I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about all the great leaders and all the men and women who've been part of this congregation, all of them who said, you know what, Jesus is way too important for us to succumb to opposition, to compromise who we are, and that even though the tide of current is going this way, in order for us to make it easier, maybe we should just go this way. And this church didn't do it for 60 years. That's what is so meaningful about this. That's what you're a part of today. That's what's meaningful and worthwhile about it, is that we've stood in opposition. And all of us will have moments where you will be asked to stand for what is right and what is true. And it's in those moments you have to choose. Will you choose the path that is easier, the path of less resistance, the path of compromise and comfort so that you can move in the flow that is pushing you? Or will you have the courage to stand strong? And so today I want to look at a story this morning that will help us have the courage and to define what we can do to develop the strength to be able to stand strong when it would be easier just to turn and move with the current that opposes us. Okay? And so this morning, we'll look at a story in the book of Daniel. And this story, I think we tend to turn everything into like a comic book. This is something that actually happened. And so this is about a guy. And in this story that we're going to look at, Daniel is now, and this is really important, he's 80 years old in the story. And he has lived in a foreign country for about 60 plus years of his life. Now, this is really important, which means that he has lived in a culture, and in the book of Daniel, he is continually being opposed, and he continually is being challenged, and he has to stand strong. And the reason why he's being opposed is because he's living in a foreign place whose culture, whose belief system, and whose conduct and behavior are completely, in most cases, opposite of his own. So he always is being challenged, but he does this incredible thing. He doesn't conform to the culture and the environment that he lives in. Now, this is so important for you and I because if you want to follow Jesus, a lot of the things that you believe in, a lot of your values, and a lot of the direction that you want to move in, they're going to go in direct opposition to most of the stuff you're going to see on Instagram. And so the temptation is to want to grab toward the things that you see on Instagram or people's lives or the culture that we live in, right? Because it's just easier that way. And a lot of what we believe and live as followers of Jesus, it goes in the opposite direction. So we're going to be continually challenged in our standing as well. And Daniel is just amazing, and he has this incredible faith, and I want to look at how he derives this incredible faith and stands strong and doesn't conform to the values and the beliefs and the way of doing things in the culture that he lives in. And he doesn't just withdraw, okay? So let me just mention this. I think two of the big mistakes that we make as Jesus people is, number one, we either succumb to the pressure to conform and just be like everybody else just to make it easier for ourselves. The other temptation is just to withdraw and distance ourselves from everybody, right? So we either conform or we withdraw, and Daniel doesn't do that. He leans in, he engages, and he lives an incredible life in an environment that is very difficult to do that. And he stands strong in his faith towards God. And so we're going to read in the beginning here in Daniel chapter 6. This is his situation. It pleased Darius. Now, Darius is the king of the Medo-Persian Empire, and he's really an administrative genius. What he does is he designates about 120 different regions, and he puts over them these governors, or they're called satraps. So they're like provincial governors. And their job was to protect the different regions. And over those 120, then he designates 3 top administrators, and Daniel is one of them. Now remember, this is a guy who's not from their country or their culture, but he has lived his life with such an excellence, and he is engaged in their culture without compromising his values in such a way that the people take notice of him, and God continues to promote and to elevate him. And so King Darius appointed these 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom. And then he put 3 administrators over them. One of them was this guy named Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. So their job is to protect the kingdom. Now verse 3, this is so cool. Daniel, he so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. The king watches Daniel work, and Daniel does everything that he does with such excellence that the king sets him over the entire kingdom. Basically says, apart from me, nobody will be higher than Daniel. And that is an incredible promotion. It also brings Daniel into incredible conflict and opposition. Because number one, he's not even from this people, and the people who want this job get passed over for Daniel. Now here's something that is so true. Whenever you make a decision to do what is right, whenever you make a decision, you're a follower of Jesus, to stand for God, you will be opposed. You will. In fact, if you're not ready for opposition, then you may not be ready to be used by God. Because that's just part of it. They go hand in hand. And it's because, number one, we have a spiritual enemy who opposes us. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Even though we live in a world that we can see and interact with our eyes and hands, our battle is spiritual. It is against rulers, it's against authorities, it's against world forces of darkness, it's against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So every time we take a stand to stand for God and His kingdom and move His kingdom forward, there's going to be opposition trying to get us not to do that. But also, oftentimes, God's strategy for doing what He does in the earth, God's strategy for glorifying Himself, is through the opposition that we experience. So sometimes when we're praying for, you ever prayed that prayer, God, use me, I want my life to count, I want to make a difference, and then all of a sudden you're experiencing opposition? The reason why that might be happening is because oftentimes the answer to that prayer is opposition. Opportunity and opposition come hand in hand, because I'm going to give you the spoiler of the story, because in the end, God gets glory when we stand strong in the midst of opposition and adversity. That's how God gets glory. No adversity, no opposition, no glory. So God says, if you really want to give me glory, then the way to do that is not to avoid the opposition, the adversity. It's actually through the opposition, the adversity. It's that you go through, that your family sees, hey, there's something going on in this person's life, and I know it's not them because I know them. It's that some of you in your workplaces, you're going through some opposition, adversity. It may be the enemy. Some of it may just be God's opportunity in your life. He wants to give himself glory through your life, and the way for that to happen is for you to be able to stand strong in the strength of God in the midst of that opposition. And so Daniel is going to stand strong in the midst of this opposition. It's really incredible. So I want to give us three truths that are going to help us stand strong in the midst of opposition. And here's the first one. When God raises you up, expect people to tear you down. Expect people to tear you down. And that doesn't mean like we're looking forward to it. That just means that's just kind of the natural way that things happen. When God begins to raise us up, that's why sometimes when you get a promotion, the people that you expect to be the most excited about it sometimes are really struggling with jealousy and just criticalness, right? It's that crab pot syndrome that we experience, right? You put a bunch of crabs in a basket, and one of them starts to get out. The others inadvertently pull that crab back into the basket. And the idea behind that theory or that idea or that syndrome is that nobody wants somebody else to get what they don't have. So these guys, they're jealous of Daniel because Daniel is getting what they don't have. And so they're wanting to scheme as to how to bring Daniel back into his place so he doesn't get what they have. And unfortunately, oftentimes, when God lifts us up or raises us up, others will try and tear us down. And you make a decision that you're going to follow Jesus, and you're going to make a decision. You got some personal decision that you're making. I'm going to downsize my life, and I'm going to get out of debt. And then people will challenge that decision. Or one woman told me, and I think this is such a beautiful decision. She said, I just got this job opportunity, and it's the job that I've been working for all my life. But in this season of my life with my children, I feel like if I take this job, even though there's potential for gain in my career and financial gain, I feel like I'll lose this season with my kids. And so my friends think I'm crazy. The people who've offered me the job think I'm crazy. But I'm not going to take the job because I want to use the season. She made this personal decision, and all of a sudden, everybody kind of is like, well, why would you do something like that? Because she's got something inside of her that says, I have the season with my family, and it's a small season, so I could take that, and everybody thinks I should, and everybody's opposed to me because I'm not, but I'm going to choose to stand strong and do this. I've seen families do that. We've done this with our own family with sports. I want my kid to be the next Tiger Woods. I do. I want my kid to beat Tom Brady. It ain't going to happen because we're all 5'4", 5'6", something like that. It ain't going to happen. But we've had to choose at different times because of sport. This is just us. Sports on Sunday and the different things that happen on Sunday. We've had to choose not to participate in that so that we could be a part of a spiritual family. We just had to make that choice. Some of you have made that choice. And it doesn't make sense to anybody. Why would you give that opportunity up? Because there's something greater that you're standing strong, convinced, firm in. That your family needs more than anything else. And so you make that decision. Some of you, you're really excited about your faith. You just came into a relationship with Jesus and everything is brand new. And you know that God, He saved me and He delivered me out of that sin. And He forgave me and I'm feeling this healing in my soul. And nothing else could provide this and Jesus does. And you're just excited about your faith. And then others come and they make fun of you. They kind of tear down your faith. And even well-meaning Christians can kind of go, calm down, young pup. This is what happened to me. I was so excited, man. I went and I was telling everybody, Jesus has changed my life. And they were like, yeah. Just calm down already, When you're more mature like us, which is really just a way of saying, you're not allowed to be that excited. No, if that's you, go. Tell everybody what Jesus has done in your life. But when we stand, there will be opposition. When God lifts us up, when He raises us up, there will expect people to at times tear us down, even well-meaning people. And Daniel's experiencing this from people who are not well-meaning. They're opposing him. So here's what they do. They conspire and they kind of butter up the king and they say, hey, king, here's what you should do. in order to expand your influence, in order to let all the other nations know how powerful you are, and you're such a great king anyway, you should have a time, 30 days, where nobody's allowed to pray to any other god but you. And if somebody does pray to any other god, then that person should be thrown into a lion's den. Well, the king, who's politically motivated and whose ego is now built up, decides that might be a good thing, and so he puts forth this edict that this is going to happen. And they do this because they know that the only way to get Daniel is to oppose what Daniel is very strong and convinced of. And so here's what it says. At this, in verse 4, at this, the administrators and the satraps, they tried to find grounds against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They even called in Robert Mueller, and they could find no corruption in him at all. It's what mine says anyway. Because he was trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent. Can you imagine this? He served as a servant in this country for over 60 years now, and they can find nothing in him. The only thing they're convinced of is this guy has a relationship with God, and he will stand for his God. That's all they know. Finally, these men said, we'll never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it is something to do with the law of his God. The only way. I think this is real important because, sometimes many people mistakenly think that being a follower of Christ means somehow coming to this environment where there's no more opposition, where everything goes right and everything works according to plan. And like I said before, oftentimes God works through opposition. So opportunity and opposition come together hand in hand. In fact, some of you are in a situation of opposition and adversity. And I want to encourage you, it is so important that you stand strong in that moment. And you're not alone. God will help you stand strong because oftentimes opportunity and opposition come hand in hand. And this is God setting you up and setting himself up for glory. But in order for that to happen, we've got to stand strong. And so Daniel finds himself in this type of a situation where oftentimes, again, we think that my life should not have this opposition. And it's just not true. We have a spiritual enemy. God uses that. And so here, Daniel is now in this place where he's going to have to make a decision. This created a big problem for Daniel, obviously, because if he does what he feels convinced to do, which is his life of prayer and relationship with God, it will mean that his life will be in jeopardy. He'll be thrown into a lion's den. So this creates big problems for Daniel. He's basically got, a few options. Number one, he could basically not do it anymore, not pray anymore publicly. And, Daniel, he's got a good track record with God. For 80 years, he's been walking with God. He could have said in his mind or heart or even to God, hey, God, look, I've been faithful and you've been faithful for 80 years. Let's just take a month off. This is 1 month. Let's just take a month off and we'll resume the following month. He could have said that. He also could have faked it, right? He could have faked it. I'm just not going to pray the same way that I prayed anymore. I'll just pray in my mind. Or I'll just pray, the servants are watching Daniel and his lips are moving, but no words are coming out. Daniel, are you praying? No, I'm not praying. He could have done that. Or thirdly, he could actually continue to do what he'd always done, which is stand firm in his conviction to pray. Stand firm in his conviction to have a public relationship with God. And so that's what he actually does. So as we continue on this morning, here's what I really want to focus in. What is it about Daniel that causes him to have this crazy, bold, audacious type of faith where he is willing to risk even death? I mean, a horrible death. Getting torn apart by lions, that's a horrible death. He's willing to face that to stand strong in the midst of his own conviction. Not to compromise, not to back off of what he believes or how he lives. What is it about Daniel, and what is it that you and I can learn and glean and do to have that kind of a faith? And so now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, here's what he did. He went home to his upstairs room where he opened the windows toward Jerusalem, and then 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed. giving thanks to his God, and this is so important, just as he had done before. It's not something that Daniel just did in the moment. This is something that Daniel had done for the last 80 years of his life. And in fact, he did it in a more celebrated way. When people were told before Daniel's time that when you get exiled or if you're taken to another nation or another country, you're to face toward Jerusalem, which is the epicenter of where God's presence was and God's people, and you're to make prayers there. And Daniel doesn't do it in secret. He opens the window so that everybody can see that even though culture is pushing in this direction, I'm going to stand in the direction that I'm going in. And he opens the windows of his place, and 3 times a day, he continues to do what he's always done. He prays. Boldly, confidently, he risks his own life to stand firm in his convictions. Now that should encourage you. Some of you, you're being tempted. You're being tempted to engage in a business deal that you feel like lacks integrity, and you're being put, what if I don't do that, maybe I'm not going to get promoted, or I'm not going to have favor with the group anymore, or my career is going to be stunted, and you're challenged with what you should do. There's something inside of you that goes, you know what, I need to stand strong, and there's something inside of you that goes, but if I do, I'm going to miss out on opportunities. And Daniel, same thing. He's one of the highest men. And if I do this, then this is going to cost me potentially not only my position, but my life. And he makes this decision to continue to do what he's always done before. And here's what he's always done before. Daniel had predetermined that he was going to build an intimate relationship with God. He doesn't just pray because he has a need. This is what he's always done before. The reason why Daniel can stand strong in the midst of this situation is because he had knelt before God throughout his lifetime. He had predetermined that he was going to build an intimate friendship and relationship with God. His faith was strong because God had been faithful to him all these years. This is not just something that Daniel did in the moment. This is something that Daniel had always done before. And so he just continues to do what he's always done before. And I say that to say, because there are a lot of people who are trying to follow Christ, but they've never predetermined that they're going to have an intimate relationship with Christ. And if you've never determined to have if you never predetermined, if you never intentionally sought to have a intimate relationship with Christ, the chances of you having one are really small, And when I say predetermined, I mean you have a plan to actually have that relationship with Christ. And I'll tell you my plan real quick. My plan is basically every morning I open up the Bible and I read the Bible. And I engage in a relationship with Christ. And I pray. And I pray. And here's what you need to know. When you pray, those are not just little like, cliches that you're saying. Those are opportunities to speak before the God of heaven. I don't think Daniel thought to himself, I've done everything I can do. I can't do anything else now. All I've got to do is to pray. I think Daniel felt like, no. I can pray. I can pray as I always have, and I have an audience with the creator of the universe. No matter what's going on in your life, no matter what's going on in your workplace, you have an audience with the creator of the universe. He is the beginning. He was the one before anything, and he will be after everything. He's the one who holds all things in the palm of his hands. He's the one who came for you and I, and he died for our sins, and he rose from the dead. He is the one who sits at the right hand of the Father. He's the one who listens to our prayers, and he hears us. He's the one who says, I'll be with you in trouble. We have an audience with that kind of God. That's who we have an audience. So when you pray, you're speaking to that God. He hears you. You can pray. We can pray, and Daniel knew he can pray. And this was his life. And it was built over time. My youngest daughter is at our youth camp right now. And in preparation for the youth camp, they had this 56-day challenge. It was so cool. 56 days where they read the Bible and they did devotionals. And she said, Daddy, I'm gonna do this thing. I'm going to do this thing because there were incentives. They were giving away certain rewards, so that's good. But she learned something in the process of it, which is so cool. I said, so after the 56 days, I said, I've noticed some things have changed. She just seemed to have a more confident faith in God. And I said, I noticed some things have changed. But what have you learned? And she said, you know what I've learned is that relationship doesn't happen in the moment. It happens over many moments. And those are my words. She said, because when I first started reading it, it didn't really make any sense. I didn't feel like I had a connection with God. And I didn't feel like I was hearing things. Because I would ask her, what do you feel like the Lord's speaking to you? She said, I don't know. But she said, and the second day, I just felt the same thing. And the third day, I felt the same thing. But the fourth day, it began to make sense to me. And the fifth day, I kind of felt like something was happening. I don't even know how to describe it, because relationship is not built in a moment. It's built over many moments. And if you've not predetermined to have many moments, the chances of you're having an intimate relationship, chances of you're having the faith that you need to be able to stand strong are small. But if you predetermine to daily meet with God, you predetermine to get in the Bible and look in the Scriptures, and you predetermine. So here's what I do. I read my Bible, and I say a simple prayer like this. I just say, God, you are first in my life, Jesus. I exist to serve and to glorify you. Lord, my hands, my mouth, my mind, everything, it belongs to you. Use me in a way that pleases you. Glorify yourself through me. Help me to walk in a manner worthy of you. Help me to walk in a manner worthy of my call. And I just surrender my life. And Lord, help me in these areas where I'm tempted to compromise and to shrink back. Help me to stand strong for you, because I know that if I do that, you will receive the glory from it. Daniel predetermined and for 80 years was cultivating relationship with God. And it was a relationship with God that was cultivated through prayer. He was communicating with the creator of the universe, the one that loved him and knew everything about him, the one who allowed him to be in this situation of opposition and adversity. And then there's one part of the scripture that I think is really powerful. Put that scripture back up. It says, giving thanks as he had done just before, but this is what he did. He got down on his knees and he prayed. He got down on his knees and he prayed. There is a very practical and powerful connection with our posture and our soul and our heart. There's something about this. If you've never done this, I know this may sound really weird. It did when I first thought about doing this, but there's something really powerful. I'm going to grab one of these chairs. Thank you. I have this chair that's right next to my bed. And the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I get down on my knees. And it's something that does something to my heart just by taking a physical posture of humility, of surrender, of dependence, of desperation. And I pray. I do this. Daniel chose that posture of surrender, that posture of humility, that posture of desperation. And I just want to encourage you, imagine what would happen if instead of kneeling before your emails and the text messages and all the things you got to do on your to-do list, you knelt before God and you humbled yourself in His presence. Imagine if you thought about some of the places where you're tempted to shrink back. Maybe there's a situation in your work, again, where you're challenged to do a business deal that you feel compromised about. And you're struggling. What if you surrendered and you just knelt before God, and in the morning you say, God, this is an area where I'm challenged. And I'm kneeling in prayer, asking you to give me strength so that I can stand. Because when we kneel in prayer, that's where God gives us the strength to stand for Him. That's what happened with Daniel. He knelt in prayer, and God gave him the strength to be able to do what Daniel always did, even though it might have cost him his life. And he continued to do it. He continued to do it. What if on Monday morning, what if tomorrow you just got up in the morning and you just knelt, and in humility you surrendered to God, and in humility you said, God, give me strength to stand in this place of diversity, in this relationship, in this work situation, in this area where I feel like you want me to do this, but everything is saying in culture, pushing me the other way. Lord, help me to stand strong and do what will be pleasing to you. This morning, if you find yourself something challenging, you can kneel in prayer. You can seek the God of heaven. You can pray to the God of heaven. Oftentimes, in that opposition, there is this moment where God is going to glorify Himself. And here's the truth. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're going to have opportunity to stand for Him. Sometimes it's going to be standing for something that's maybe a big issue in the world. Sometimes it's going to be something in your neighborhood. Sometimes it might be something smaller. Maybe it's just a personal, environment where you feel like you just need to get out of that so that you can avoid the temptation that is there. Every time you go into that environment, you're going to stand. And immediately you're going to hear in your mind, but if you do that, you're going to miss out on opportunity. But if you're going to do that, what is your family going to think? But if you do that, what is your coworker's going to think? But what if you do that, you're not going to get the promotion? If you do that, and all these different things. And I wish I could promise you that if you stand for God, you'll never experience the negative consequences of that. But that's not reality. That's Disney. That's where every story has a happy ending. And before Daniel knows how the story's going to end, he stands for God. All he knows is that God has been faithful to me all these years, and I can trust this to him. And if I do what is right, then I can trust God with the results. If he were here today, I think he'd tell us that if you do what is right, you can trust God always with the results. And honestly, things may not turn out exactly the way that you want, and sometimes we will suffer for making a stand. But we will have the pleasure of our God. And God will have an opportunity to glorify himself through our lives. I'm going to invite the worship team to join me this morning. Because when we do what is right, we can always trust God with the results. For Daniel, the consequences of him standing and praying are that he actually is thrown into the lion's den. They come and they find him because this whole thing is really about Daniel. They want to catch him doing something he's not supposed to do. They come and they find him praying to God like he's not supposed to be doing. They tell the king, he's doing this. And the king is forced to. The king actually likes Daniel. The king is forced to follow through, and he throws him into a pit of hungry lions. And miraculously, God intervenes and shuts the mouths of the lions. And throughout the night, Daniel is not harmed. And the next morning, the king goes and he wants to see the condition of Daniel. And he's desperate. And he basically says, is your living God, the God that you serve so continually? Because I've seen it. Was your God able to save you, to deliver you? And Daniel speaks up and says, I'm still here. Yes, he did. And then the guys who tried to conspire against him are gathered up and they're thrown into the lion's den. And they're not spared. They're not saved. Now here's the beauty of this whole thing. Because Daniel stands strong, not only is he able to continue to be raised up, but God uses this moment to make an impact on a king and eventually on a kingdom. And this is what the king says at the end of this. Daniel, your God, he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. This is a man who doesn't even know Daniel's God except through Daniel. And the moment that is most powerful for this king is the moment where Daniel stands strong, even though it could have cost him his life. When you stand strong in the conviction that God has placed in your heart, when you do what is right, you can trust God with the results. And he will use that to make an impact on other people. So for those of you, you've been praying, God, I pray that you would reach my family. I pray that you would reach my coworkers. And you find yourself in opposition. That opposition may be the enemy. That opposition may also be your opportunity. Your opportunity to stand strong in God. Your opportunity for God to support you in strength and to demonstrate his goodness and his glory through your life. To do exactly what you're asking him to do, which is to reach the people that you love.